On August 28, 1945, on the island of Cebu in the central Philippines, World War II came to its final conclusion in a way that reflected how the conflict truly ended across much of Asia and the Pacific. There were no dramatic last battles, no explosions, and no cheering crowds. Instead, the war ended here through a formal, controlled surrender ceremony that marked the collapse of Japanese authority on the island and the definitive end of nearly 4 years of occupation. For the people of Cebu, this moment was not symbolic or abstract. It was the real end of fear, hunger, and violence that had shaped everyday life since 1942. Cebu's role in World War II was shaped by its geography and long-standing importance within the Philippines. Located in the heart of the Visayas, Cebu was one of the country's most important ports and commercial centers. It served as a crossroads for shipping routes connecting Luzon in the north with Mindanao in the south. Control of Cebu meant control over movement, logistics, and communication across much of the central Philippines. For Japan, capturing Cebu was essential to securing its newly conquered empire in Southeast Asia. The Japanese invasion of the Philippines began in December 1941, almost simultaneously with the attack on Pearl Harbor. American and Filipino forces were caught off guard and quickly overwhelmed by Japanese air superiority and coordinated landings. Within months, Allied defenses collapsed. Cebu fell in April 1942, and Japanese forces established military rule over the island. What followed was a period that would leave deep scars on the population. Under Japanese occupation, daily life on Cebu became a constant struggle. Japanese authorities requisitioned food, livestock, and supplies for their war effort, leaving civilians with little to survive on. Malnutrition and disease spread rapidly, particularly among children and the elderly. Forced labor became common, with civilians compelled to work on roads, airfields, and military installations under harsh conditions. Failure to comply often resulted in beatings, imprisonment, or execution. The Japanese military enforced strict discipline through fear. Curfews were imposed, radios were confiscated, and movement was tightly controlled. The military police carried out arrests and interrogations, often based on suspicion alone. Public executions were used as warnings, reinforcing the message that resistance would not be tolerated. Entire communities lived in fear of sudden raids or collective punishment. Despite the risks, resistance never disappeared. Filipino guerrilla movements formed across Cebu, drawing fighters from all walks of life. Former soldiers, farmers, students, and laborers joined together in small, decentralized units. These guerrillas relied heavily on civilian support, using villages for shelter, food, and intelligence. They operated with limited weapons, often relying on captured arms, improvised explosives, or supplies delivered by Allied submarines. The goal of the guerrillas was not to defeat the Japanese outright, but to weaken them. They sabotaged roads and bridges, disrupted supply lines, ambushed patrols, and gathered intelligence for the Allies. Their presence forced Japanese troops to divert manpower to security duties and kept them under constant pressure. Over time, this resistance eroded Japanese morale and control. As World War II progressed, conditions worsened for Japanese forces on Cebu. Allied submarines and aircraft dominated surrounding waters, cutting off resupply. Food shortages became severe, forcing Japanese soldiers to forage or seize supplies from civilians, further increasing hostility. Disease spread rapidly in jungle conditions, and medical care was minimal. By 1944, many Japanese units were isolated, under strength, and exhausted. The strategic situation changed dramatically in October 1944 when American forces returned to the Philippines with landings on Leyte. This marked the beginning of the Liberation Campaign. American naval and air power isolated Japanese garrisons across the archipelago, destroying shipping and preventing reinforcement. Filipino guerrillas intensified their operations, coordinating more closely with Allied forces. Cebu was liberated in March 1945 by American troops, supported by guerrilla fighters who provided intelligence, guides, and local knowledge. Major combat on the island ended, but the war itself was not yet over. Small groups of Japanese soldiers remained hidden in the mountains and forests. Some had lost contact with their command. Others refused to believe reports of Allied victories, suspecting deception. This pattern was common throughout the Pacific. By mid-1945, Japan's strategic position was hopeless. Its cities were being destroyed by conventional bombing, its navy was shattered, and its economy was collapsing. In August, the situation became catastrophic. On August 6th, the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. On August 9th, Nagasaki was destroyed by a second atomic bomb. At the same time, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Japanese-held territories in Asia. Faced with overwhelming defeat, Japan decided to surrender. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito addressed the Japanese people by radio, announcing the end of the war. For many Japanese soldiers overseas, this was the first time they had ever heard the emperor's voice. Yet even after this announcement, surrender did not occur immediately. Communication delays, confusion, and deeply ingrained military culture meant that Allied forces had to organize surrender ceremonies across thousands of locations. On Cebu, Allied commanders moved quickly to establish contact with remaining Japanese units and arrange a formal surrender. This process culminated on August 28, 1945. Japanese officers were ordered to report to Allied authorities. They arrived in uniform, representing forces that had once ruled the island through fear and violence. The surrender ceremony followed strict protocol. Allied officers read the terms of surrender, emphasizing that all Japanese forces were to cease hostilities immediately and obey Allied commands. Japanese officers formally accepted these terms and signed surrender documents. Authority over the island passed completely to the Allies. Japanese officers then issued orders to their men to comply. Weapons were collected and secured. Rifles, machine guns, pistols, grenades, and ammunition were stacked and guarded. For many soldiers, this was the first time they had laid down their weapons since the beginning of their service. The act carried enormous psychological weight. Japanese military doctrine had long emphasized death before surrender. Many soldiers had been taught that capture was worse than death. Yet by August 1945, reality had overtaken ideology. Years of hunger, disease, and isolation had broken resistance. Some soldiers stood rigid and expressionless. Others showed signs of relief that the fighting was finally over. For many, surrender meant survival and the possibility of returning home. Civilians watched the ceremony quietly. For the people of Cebu, this was the moment when occupation truly ended. It meant no more forced labor, no more arbitrary arrests, and no more public executions. Many had lost family members or endured years of deprivation. While the surrender could not undo that suffering, it brought a sense of closure and the hope of rebuilding. Filipino guerrillas were present as well, now standing openly alongside Allied forces. For years, they had lived in hiding, knowing that capture meant torture or death. Their role in undermining Japanese control and assisting liberation was now acknowledged. The surrender validated their sacrifices. After the ceremony, Japanese troops were confined to designated areas under Allied guard. Discipline was strictly enforced to prevent violence or reprisals. Japanese officers were held responsible for maintaining order among their men. Allied forces worked to ensure stability, understanding that chaos could easily erupt in the aftermath of war. In the weeks that followed, Japanese prisoners were transported to camps elsewhere in the Philippines. From there, many would eventually be repatriated to Japan, returning to a homeland devastated by bombing, shortages, and political collapse. For some, captivity would last months or even years. For Cebu, the end of World War II marked the beginning of a long recovery. Infrastructure had been damaged, trade disrupted, and agriculture neglected. Food shortages persisted, and disease remained a threat. Families searched for missing relatives and tried to rebuild their lives. Yet the end of the war made recovery possible. The surrender on Cebu also occurred during a broader transformation. The Philippines, having endured decades of colonial rule and years of brutal occupation, was preparing for independence. Make sure to subscribe to History Safe for more restored color footage from history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.